Father Hans Zollner, good to see you again. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. And how about you?
Doing very good. It's been around a year, I think, since we last spoke. And you've been a very busy man since then. We've a lot to get through, but we'll start with one of your recent trips to India. You went across different parts of India. What was the purpose of the trip?
The main purpose was, as always, giving conferences, workshops with church personnel and others in the area of safeguarding. And a byproduct of all this is getting to know what abuse is all about and what we can do as a church and a society to keep people safe.
Is it a taboo subject in India, or is it something that can be spoken about openly?
Now, sexuality as such is a huge taboo. As I learned this time, there is no place for young people where they learn about sexuality. There is no sexual education at school. In families, it is not talked about. This is what I'm told. So they learn either from their peers or from the internet, which of course is bad news. Abuse is a taboo. It is not spoken about, but it is happening. And as I have seen now in the last 10 days or so, it is coming up in different quarters of society and in different sectors of church life.
And when we last met, you made the point that of course, we've heard so much about abuse cases coming out in the West and in many parts of the Northern Hemisphere, but the stories are slow to come out from across Asia, across Africa, and you made the point that, make no mistake about it, it's happening there. The stories just haven't broke yet, the scandals. Is there a sense of that in India, that we haven't heard the stories from there yet, or they haven't broke?
Now, the thing is exactly what you say, they have not come out.
Still.
And we don't talk about the church alone. There are statistics from the Indian government from some years back that says, quote, half of the whole youth population in India is sexually abused. If you count in the 1.4 billion Indians that exist and take half of the youth population, which is huge, you come to the figure of about 200 million youth that the Indian government says has been sexually abused up to the age of 18.
Why do you think the numbers are so much higher than in other parts of the world?
Now, whether they are higher than in other parts of the world, we don't really know. Fact is that...
But if that's true, 50% of young people, you would hope that's higher than...
Yeah, but as always, especially when it comes to sexual abuse, we don't have the exact numbers, because the cases we know about is normally considered to be the tip of the iceberg. So for one case we know about, experts in the field say it is 9 others that we don't know about. So when it comes to the society in India, in all probability, it is much more pervasive in families, in the villages out there in the outback of the Indian huge continent that you have. And the question is, where does it happen and how people are encouraged to talk about it, especially if it happens and when it happens in the family context or in areas and sectors of society that are considered to be most respected. For example, all religions.
I remember interviewing Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle once of the Philippines, and we were talking about abuse in his country, and he made the point about such poverty and the idea that a child is a commodity. It's something that a family owns, and they can use it to make money for the family, whether that's through selling your child for abuse or even now on the internet. Is a lot of it down to poverty as well? Is that simplifying it too much?
I think poverty has to do with, especially in countries like Philippines or Thailand, where parents, mothers, may sell their children for sex, for money, in exchange for money, so that they can survive economic-wise and they can carry on with their families. I'm not sure whether this is true so much for India, but I believe, from what I've heard, that, for example, sexual abuse within the family is very often committed by elder brothers or uncles or grandfathers. And the surprising fact in the statistics given by the Indian government is that despite the fact that homosexuality is such a taboo topic there, according to the government, more boys are abused than girls, which is contrary to all international statistics that we have, where the presupposition is that it is girls that are most exposed to this type of abuse.
And what about the Catholic Church in India? We know that now the Catholic Church is regarded as a very safe place for children today because of all the safeguarding measures that are in place. But is the Catholic Church in India, by your estimation and your expertise, taking this seriously and putting measures in place?
Now, I've lived in India for half a year during my Jesuit formation, and I know many places in India. I've been to many states within this huge country. This time I saw a change from my last visit, which goes back 6 years, and I think I can say safely that the situation is changing and has changed to a certain degree. So sensitivity has grown, and the defensiveness about this is not our issue, this happens only in Western countries or in secularized countries, it doesn't carry. This argument is not convincing anymore, because they realize that it is going on, it has been going on, and it needs to be tackled. However, the question is, how do we deal with the past? What do we do with the victims that have been abused over the last years and decades? I think, as usual within the Catholic Church, we are very lacking in understanding, in empathy, and in doing justice to the victims from the past. Where we are relatively good, also compared to other sectors of society, to other religions, is when it comes to safeguarding training, to setting up guidelines and safety plans and policies. There, I think we do a good job, which not necessarily translates immediately into concrete action, but at least there is a certain level of understanding that it can't go on as it has been over years and decades.
So many people were happy with the progress that the Catholic Church was making, particularly here at the Vatican, and then the recent case of Fatherrupnik and how that has been handled by the Church, and the stories that have come out about the alleged abuse that he has perpetrated. Such a famous Jesuit, such a renowned artist within the Catholic Church whose work is all over the globe, a friend of Pope Francis. How do you think the Church has been handling his case?
There have been many big question marks about the handling of the case. So how did it start? How was the allegation brought forward? Who was responsible for the lifting of the excommunication, and what were the reasons for that? We don't know. I mean, at least I don't know, and the public, I think, doesn't know about who was finally responsible for all this.
But isn't that what people were hoping was a thing of the past? That we would be having an interview like this saying, well, we're happy that finally they're looking into it, or because the pressure has been put on Pope Francis a bit that he's reopening the case. It's that who's responsible, who's looking into it, and then eventually maybe people get off with things, or they just kind of fade into the distance.
Yeah, first, the Church doesn't change as a whole in 1 year, in 10 years. We are talking about a change of mentality, and the change that will certainly need a generation. This is what I started to say 10 years back, or even longer. So we are in the middle of this change process, and it is, as we see, it is not easy, and there are steps backwards, and there is not a real consistency in this. Yeah? And this makes it very difficult to get to the point where one takes also the personal responsibility for wrongdoings.
Sticking with accountability for a moment, because since you and I last spoke, you had been working at the Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors for almost 10 years, almost a decade.
9 years, yeah.
9 years. The most important department in the Vatican for safeguarding children and implementing measures for protecting vulnerable people. You were central to this. It was established by Pope Francis in 2014. And then you surprised so many people earlier this year when all of a sudden you announced you were resigning, you were leaving. What happened?
I had tried from about May 2022 to November the same year to reach out to the president of the commission. I had sent a number of emails and I didn't get even an acknowledgement of receipt of those emails. We met in person and there was no sense of, any type of getting back to me on some points that I was concerned about, which had to do with the inner functioning of the Commission. it is not about Vatican as such, it is not about the church as such, it was precisely about questions that I have had about whether within the Commission the principles that were set out in 2019 by the summit itself means taking responsibility and compliance, keeping compliance rules, accountability issues and transparency are followed through also within the Commission. I tried to raise my concerns and to make them known, but there was no reply. And then, I came to the point where I couldn't be within the Commission and stand for it if those principles, from my point of view, were not applied.
But because of your expertise, and you are held in such high regard when it comes to this issue, so there's so much weight behind your opinion and what you think or what you say about something. So when you had said things like lack of accountability, financial transparency, clarity on issues, it sounded like there was serious things wrong within the Commission.
Yeah, otherwise I wouldn't have brought them up with the Commission itself, and I wouldn't have taken that step to ask the Holy Father to let me go. And he, agreed to that. On the other hand, he appointed me to the Diocese of Rome's Safeguarding Commission.
Was he surprised, Pope Francis, when you came to him and said you were leaving the Commission?
Yes, he was surprised, yeah. But he listened to my points, and in the end he decided that he would agree to me for my leaving the Commission.
Now you're here in the institution. Tell me a bit about the work that you were doing here, the goal, the aim, the projects.
Now, the Institute of Anthropology, where I'm here, is not something that Pope Francis started. We have started that in 2012, so 2 years before he was elected Pope, as the Center for Child Protection. And that came out of my work with the area of safeguarding and dealing with allegations and, listening to victims from 2010 onwards. And I have been involved in this for all those years now. When we established the Center for Child Protection, it was clear that this is an institution within the Pontifical Gregorian University. I was at that time Dean of the Institute of Psychology, and the CCP, the Center for Child Protection, was inaugurated under the auspices of the Institute of Psychology, adding to that mission of training formators and personnel for church institutions in the area of priestly formation, religious formation, and laity formation in psychology and psychotherapy, adding that piece of safeguarding. Now, since then, a lot of things have happened in the church, the election of Pope Francis, the establishment of the Commission, new laws, and new areas that weren't there in 2012, like sexual abuse committed against seminarians by priests or bishops, the abuse of religious women by priests in some parts of the world especially, the question of the systemic, the institutional co-responsibility for abuse happening and for covering up abuse. So all this we didn't talk about, at least generally speaking, 15 years back. This is relatively new, which led also to the transformation of the Center for Child Protection to an institute, which in our academic world is a more established institution, which gives its own degrees. And we are engaged in residential courses. We run a certificate course here in English and in Spanish on safeguarding. We run a master's course in church language. It's called a licentiate in safeguarding. And we have research projects going on.
What do you think, Father Zollner, is the greatest tool or weapon for protecting children and vulnerable people in the church? Is it the safeguarding measures? Is it education? Is it raising awareness? Is it more active participation from lay people to speak when they spot something or have a suspicion? What is the greatest tool that we have?
I think the greatest tool of the Catholic Church is that all this can come together. But for this, we need to move the big ship, that the Catholic Church is in the right direction altogether. And for such an immense quantity of people and different types of institutions inside the Church, we, like dioceses, religious congregations, charitable works, mission endeavors, spiritual retreat houses, and so forth, many schools, many universities within the Catholic Church, to bring along that huge amount of people and institutions, it takes time. And I believe that the Catholic Church does a lot and can do much more to keep people inside the Church safe and have also some impact on society at large. And again, the greatest tool is that we have as Church, that we reach out to people from the grassroots level to the highest level of governance, in politicians, in companies and so forth, with NGOs, but we also have an entrance in many diverse realities of life, in school, in education, in sports. So the Church has a huge instrument in its own turf, so to say, and I would hope that we make better use of it.
Father Hans Zollner, thank you very much.
Thank you, Colm.